The woman also took her clothes off. Renato was still seeing Malena's face. Hey guys, movie recap here. Today I'll show you the movie, Malena, from 2000. We start at an Italian town, where some army guys are ordering the people to listen to a presidential address. The speech was to announce that Mussolini had declared war on France and Great Britain. We meet Renato, the narrator. He tells us that he remembered that day forever because it was the first time he saw a certain woman. Renato rode to the edge of town while Mussolini was in his speech. The boy went to the beach and showed his new bicycle to his friends, who were up to something. A woman came out of her house and the guys lined themselves to see her walking. Renato discovered how much he liked her from the beginning. The boys followed her around to stare at her in different spots of the town. The woman never even looked at them. She seemed very sad. Her name was Malena, the daughter of a half-deaf teacher. We see the boys in class and Renato fantasizing about Malena. He also started thinking about her at night, and couldn't sleep well. The next morning, Renato decided to skip class and go to Malena's house. He stayed in front of her, daydreaming about Malena calling him to help her buy cigarettes. Renato then went to a clothing store to buy pants. He said his father would pay for them. After that, at Renato's house, Renato's father hit him for skipping school and buying the pants. Renato was ashamed because he was forced to wear shorts, and didn't like them. Renato sneaked out of his house at night with a lantern. He went directly to Malena's place and opened a small hole in one of the walls. He stared at her for a while, noticing she lived alone. He also saw a few pictures of Malena's marriage. Her husband was a soldier. We then see Renato in the barber shop. He was still upset because he didn't want to sit on the children's chair. He complained about it while the men in the place spoke about the war. Watching Malena became a pastime for Renato. He went to her house for days and nights. He watched her take the sun, sew some clothes, smoke cigarettes, and listen to music. Renato couldn't stop looking at her and was enamored of her body. Malena didn't suspect anything and stayed with her routine. She danced with the picture of her husband. Renato went to a music store. He wanted to buy the vinyl with the music that Malena was dancing to the night before. He took it to his place and listened to it while he watched some women's pictures. It wasn't long before he imagined Malena entering his bedroom with her white dress. We then see him writing a letter to her. He had written a few letters, but threw them into the ocean instead of sending them to her. Renato decided to follow Malena into town. We see that almost everyone in Malena's path noticed and stared at her for a while. She was aware of it but didn't say anything, or complained about it. Malena always had that sad look on her face. Renato then followed her to a house. It looked like she didn't want anyone to notice the place or that she was going into it. She said she had forgotten her key, so someone had to throw one at her from a window. Renato's fantasy made him even think that he was in the movies with Malena. He was angry at her. He later took his bicycle to repair it and spotted Malena walking through town again. Renato put himself in front of her but she kept walking and didn't notice him. The boy followed her to the same house as before and decided to climb a fence to see what was happening there. He saw a man, but it was Malena's father, the teacher. Renato was happy because it wasn't a lover, and kept on fantasizing about him being with her. Later, during exercises, one of Renato's friends told him that Malena's husband had died. Some army men held a gathering to honor Malena's husband. The people of the town immediately started speaking about Malena getting a new husband. Renato abandoned the gathering and went to Malena's father's place. He climbed the fence and spotted Malena on her bed. She was crying, devastated by her husband's death. Renato kissed her and told her he was going to be forever with her. That she just had to wait for him to grow up. The people from the town kept speaking about Malena, about what would her plans would be now that she was a widow. Renato didn't like people speaking ill about her, and used every chance he had to avenge her. He broke glasses, spit on drinks, and peed on purses. He also went to a church to light a candle for a saint. He asked the saint to protect Malena for the next 4 years until he had grown up. Malena's mood was even worse than before. She dressed only in black, and always had a gloomy look. Renato stole one of her blouses and took it to his house. He was still imagining being in the movies with her. The next day, his father went to wake him up and noticed the blouse. He said he was a fetishist and hit him. Renato's mother burned the blouse and his father punished him. He locked him up for a few days, and Renato refused to eat. A doctor had to visit Renato. He told his parents that he needed some air. Later at school, Malena's father received an anonymous note saying that he was dishonored because his daughter was sleeping with a lot of men. The teacher left the room and the boys got into a fight for Malena. Renato imagined he was fighting for her in a coliseum. He then went to her house at night. She was having dinner with a soldier, and Renato hated that. The soldier left the house but found another man on his way in. The other man was the town's dentist, who said he was invited. The two men fought, but the wife from the dentist arrived and said she had caught her husband in the act. The woman also screamed that Malena was a husband thief. Everyone in town was once again talking about Malena. In the eyes of the people, she was a whore. According to them, she should go to jail because of the events with the dentist. We then see Malena trying to enter his father's house, but he had changed the lock. Renato was there watching everything. Malena then went to a lawyer. There was a case in court against Malena for supposedly provoking the dentist and messing with his family. The judge asked if she had ever been with the dentist. Malena answered that the man had been to her house once. Was there just to give her some medicine for her father. The judge also told Malena that the soldier she had been seeing said that they just had a casual relationship, an adventure. Renato, who was on the court, cursed him. Malena's lawyer defended her and made the judge sentence the dentist to a psychiatric clinic. Malena was clear about the charges. We then see her in her house, dancing with the lawyer. She told him that he didn't have money to pay him, so he forced her to be with him. Renato fell off the tree from which he was looking into the house. Renato went to church and punched the statue of the saint he had been praying to. He said that they were even now. Back in class, another teacher came to replace Malena's father. Renato wrote a letter to Malena, saying that he didn't understand why was she with that old man. The new teacher noticed the letter and tried to take it away from him, but Renato ate it and got out of the classroom. He threw down a Mussolini bust that was in the school. Renato had no pants and was able to sit on the adult's chair in the barber shop. He kept on following Malena around and noticed that she was starving. She was getting some food when dozens of planes appeared in the sky and panic spread. The war arrived in the town. The planes dropped bombs and some of the houses were destroyed. Renato tried to help, and we discover that Malena's father was buried under one of the destroyed houses. Everyone in town assisted with his funeral, with Malena in the front. All the men tried to comfort the widow. Malena was in deep grief. She cut her hair in front of a mirror, with Renato still watching from the hole in his wall. She took her clothes off and massaged her chest. Then, another soldier came to her door saying that he had brought food for her. He came in and immediately started kissing her. She told him he could keep coming as long as he brought food. Renato heard that and went into a rage. Malena made her usual walk through the town and situated on a chair in the plaza. She had dyed her hair red, and once again was the center of attention. She took out a cigarette and immediately there were like 6 men offering to light it for her. Renato kept fantasizing about being his lover. He wanted to rescue her. The Nazis were already in town. Malena was hanging out with them, and the people of the town called her a slut. Her hair was now blonde. Renato saw her entering a car with Nazi soldiers and fainted in the barber shop. His mother took him to the church, then to some women. They wanted them to take the evil out of him, but his father told her he was just growing up. The planes once again showed up and the alarms went off. Renato's father decided to take him to a brothel. The woman there seduced Renato, but even then he was only seeing Malena. Every woman in the brothel looked like her to him in the brothel. A brunette woman grabbed him to take him into her room. She took his clothes off while they heard bombs exploding nearby. The woman also took her clothes off. Renato was still seeing Malena's face. The boy said it wasn't his first time because he had imagined that happening multiple times before. The next day, we see the Allied forces entering the town, celebrating that Mussolini was beaten. Renato rode one of the cars of the Allied forces, smiling and screaming. The people of the town waved white handkerchiefs. A few women went to take Malena out of a hotel she was staying, slut-shaming her for having slept with the Germans. They took her to the plaza, hit her, and took off her clothes. Renato noticed the situation and suffered. The women left Malena in a bad state, bleeding and naked. They cut her hair off and told her she had it coming for stealing husbands and sleeping with the enemy. Malena was wounded and shamed in front of everyone in the town. She screamed in front of the men, but no one did anything to help her. The women kicked her out. We then see a bunch of people leaving the town by train, including Malena. She had her black clothes on once again and did her best to remain unrecognized. She left with Renato staring at her from the distance. He went to the beach where he used to hang out with his friends to throw the vinyl he had bought into the sea. He wanted to forget about Malena. Later, a car arrived in the town with a man. It was Malena's husband, who wasn't dead after all. He walked to his house through the abandoned ruins of the town and found it full of people. He asked for Malena, but the people there told him they had occupied the house because it was empty. The man went to the Allied headquarters to ask for his wife. Renato was now following him around the town. The soldier asked some men about his wife, but they mocked him and told him to search in the brothels. One of them hit him to the ground. Renato helped him. Later that night, Renato went to Malena's house and tossed a letter to the soldier. He wrote that he was the only one to know the truth about Malena and that she had been faithful to him the entire time. 1 year later, we see a grown Renato walking through a repaired town alongside a young woman. Malena showed up with her husband, and everyone stopped everything to watch them while they walked. Renato's girlfriend asked him why everyone was staring at Malena, but he said it was nothing. Malena then went into the food market, where everyone was still speaking about her. The woman that had cut her hair was also there and saluted her. Malena saluted her back, and everyone suddenly changed their attitude toward her. They said she was still a beautiful woman and offered her some clothes and food for free. Renato chased her around again. She dropped some oranges on her way home and Renato immediately went to help her. He wished her good luck and pedaled away. Renato then tells us that he had loved many women, but Malena was the only one he could never forget. Do you think Malena's punishment was deserved? This was the recap for the movie Malena. Drop a like if you liked the video. Thanks guys, see you tomorrow.